Hey guys, welcome to this next training video. Today I'm going to go over how to deal with a one spouse being present. So certainly in this type of scenario, most of the time the spouse that is calling upon the other spouse to set an appointment, usually their objective is to gather information, not necessarily make a decision, right? When it comes to solar, it's a big purchase. We're asking for a $30,000 to $40,000 decision, and that's not something that they are going to do impulsively. It's not something that they're just going to wake up and say, hey, I'm going to sign a $30,000 loan today, right? Clearly we have to do our job to be able to give them the information required so that they can make that decision. So most of the time customers are going to call around different solar companies and they're going to get different bids, and this is what I like to call the research process. And so ultimately, each customer needs to have a certain amount of information, and this information needs to be relayed between both spouses in order for them to make a decision. Okay? So one of the biggest mistakes that reps make going into this, especially when it's just one spouse present, is we give information out without having both of them being present. Okay? So ultimately, half the problem is giving them the information that they need. The other half of the problem is getting them to like you and building that rapport. Okay, Brian Tracy talks about how we shouldn't give customer the price until they are ready to hear it. And I feel like in this instance, if you're dealing with one spouse, maybe hold off on giving them the total loan amount, the total price, until both spouses are there present. Because what ends up happening is if you just give them the information and that's it, then they might just be tempted to say, hey, give me your card, I'll call you and we'll think about it. And then what ends up happening is you end up leaving, the second spouse comes home and they say, hey honey, guess what, the solar guy came by, how much is it? And she's going to be like, it's a $35,000 loan. And then boom, you get the big thumbs down. Why is that? It's because you didn't give the right information to that customer and you didn't present it in their way adequately in order for them to make a decision. So what I like to do is, if it's just me and one spouse, I like to hit the pause button and I'll politely invite the second customer to be present. I'll say, hey, Mr. Customer, I have this design ready. I'd like to show it to your spouse. Are you able to call her or call him real quick so that they can see this? Most of the time they're going to agree and they're going to call the spouse. And in this instance, if the spouse is coming and if you can hear footsteps, that's really good, because that means that now you can actually get into the trenches with them, and the real work begins once you have both of them present. Now what tends to happen is when the second spouse comes into the presentation, be ready to adapt to the second spouse. Because as you can tell, most of the time their personalities are different. In most instances, their personalities are opposite. So you may be able to chit chat with spouse number one, and then all of a sudden spouse number two comes in and their personality is completely different, right? And they could be the type of spouse that they could just come in and say, hey, give me the price, what's the APR, what's my loan term, bam, 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 right? So you got to be ready to get on your A game. You got to be able to deliver and be able to adapt to that second personality. That way, you're able to facilitate and help both spouses get that information that they need. Because like I said, once you have both spouses and they understand the information that you're giving to them, then the second part of the equation is to get them to like you, build that trust, and build that relationship. Okay? Now, if for whatever reason, you're sitting down with spouse number one, and they tell you straight up like, hey, my spouse isn't here, my wife or husband is not here, then what do? Well, you politely kind of downgrade a little bit, and you begin by transitioning to, hey, I'm going to come back maybe tomorrow or a different day when your spouse is here. That way, they can give the information that they are required. My biggest suggestion is to not give out any type of financial details. Don't give out APRs. Don't give out the loan amount. Why? Because again, you're going to fall into that same trap, and the customer is just going to take that information, give it to their spouse, and maybe you have a 5% chance of closing that deal. Like, they'll call you back and say, hey, we want to do it, right? That doesn't tend to happen. So I would rather just hold that information to myself and maybe build some rapport, chit chat with them for a little bit, and then just politely say, hey, I can come back, tomorrow or the next day when your spouse is available. That way we can kind of go over this. Okay? It's very important that when you set the go back appointment, make sure to do it within a 48-hour time window, and also make sure to do it with a specific time. Okay? That way it's not just hanging up in the air. And so I hope that this has been an awesome video and you guys have learned something from this. I'm going to be making more videos, and we'll see you guys in the next one.